William Seabrook's The Magic Island: Tangled Truths About Haiti and the Caribbean. Thank you for reading this exciting book. William Seabrook's The Magic Island originally was published in 1929. It garnered immediate attention and success at the time, becoming a Literary Guild selection and a national bestseller. This date of 1929 is very important to remember because this book operates within both American or Western modernist and colonialist viewpoints. The modernism of the book emerges in several ways, including in its form. According to the book's cover, it is classified as, quote, social science / anthropology, end quote. However, it can be observed that the book exists in several other categories, such as travelogue or travel writing, an adventure novel, a nonfiction novel, and a gothic novel. This moving target definition for the Magic Island aligns to modernism's tenet for constant reinvention. We will explore a few of these styles in the presentation. The Magic Island also speaks to the United States' intervention and occupation of Haiti from 1915 to 1934. Interestingly, Seabrook appears to speak against this colonization of Haiti on the one hand. On the other hand, he describes Haiti and its peoples in racist terms and depictions. He also positions himself sometimes a neutral party to colonialism, while at other times he makes himself the center of attention, intruding and interloping upon sacred ceremonies. In these ways and others, the Magic Island presents a complicated history of Haiti and the Caribbean. Among the many takeaways I want you to get from this presentation is the ability to critique books about the Caribbean written by writers outside of the region. You should ask complex questions and interrogate the relationships between the ones in power and the more powerless parties in literature. As a result, this presentation will examine many of the quote, unquote, tangled truths in the book. The book thus becomes an important historical and literary document that offers opportunities to learn about Haiti and imperialism. As a parting fact, Magic Island and Seabrook are often cited as the source that popularized the word zombie in English language. We will also talk about this later in the presentation. Before we continue, I want to outline what this presentation will not cover. I will not be talking about the larger history of Hispaniola, the island that Haiti shares with the Dominican Republic. I will not be talking about the history of slavery in Haiti, predominantly during its colonial history under France, when Haiti was known as Saint-Domingue. I will not be talking about the history of the Haitian Revolution. While all these histories are important, there are lots of other resources to better understand these topics, including some of my other Caribbean videos. I will also not dive into the contemporary political and social situations in Haiti. These situations change so rapidly that it makes it difficult for me to generalize here. The Magic Island describes the chaotic scenes that prompted the United States' intervention in the early 20th century. These scenes seem prophetic to Haiti's current society. To understand the importance of the Haitian Revolution and its significance around the Black world, I would recommend the following books: C.L.R. James's The Black Jacobin, Crystal N. Temple's Black Cultural Mythology in her chapter devoted to Haiti as a diaspora-wide mythology, Carolyn Fick's The Making of Haiti, and Julia Scott's The Common Wind. In the map above, you can see Haiti and its surrounding islands. Of note is Ile de Gavon, which is one of the settings of the book. I recommend reading Zora Hurston's account of this island in her book, Tell My Horse. Mondesal is also pictured on the map. Later in this presentation, we will examine the history of the American occupation of Haiti. Before we look into the occupation / colonial history of the United States and Haiti, we must understand William Seabrook. Seabrook, in many ways, is an enigma, an intellectual who strives for more knowledge and hidden truths, while at the same time he appears to be bigoted and prejudiced. An objective journalist who tries to give facts, while at the same time he inserts himself at the center of his stories. An intrepid explorer who endeavors to learn and identify with similarities across cultures, while at the same time he cannot disguise his American superiority. And a talented writer who bridges many genres and styles, while at the same time he never really holds one style to perfection. I could continue with many more labels, but I will say simply that William Seabrook in his life is complicated, contradictory, and coincidental. He enjoyed many truly unique experiences, places, and peoples around the world, and he did his best to speak about his truth about them. That last point needs more emphasis. While we could look at his works as truths or facts, we must remember that all of these are filtered through the man himself and all the issues he dealt with, the artist and all the literary techniques he employs, and the culture and all its foibles, prejudices, and misunderstandings. Indeed, at one point in the book, Seabrook notes, quote, "The truth is at best a tangled thing," end quote. In other words, it is hard to distinguish truth. As the quote under his portrait indicates, truth can be a beautiful thing even when it's tangled and dubious. To me, this statement indicates that the truth is more in the interspace between reality and fiction, between imagination and observation. We must be able to interpret the world and the literatures of our world with discerning, critical eyes. To be a scholar in any area, you thus must be able to look at these complex layers and tease out how they shape the end products you examine. When critiquing the Magic Island, we must not forget that Seabrook makes a lot of claims, many of which he explains, accepts, dismisses, and or denies as legitimate. As a Caribbean scholar, I'll to give you the tools to deconstruct the book and question many of its parts and ideas. Turning to the slide above, Seabrook moved around many times in his life. Notably, he lived and worked in Augusta, near my home institution at the University of South Carolina, Aiken. Many of his war correspondence articles formed the basis of his first book, Diary of Section 8. Seabrook's more notable books, listed above, were bestsellers. In Adventures in Arabia, The Magic Island, Jungle Ways, and Asylum, Seabrook embeds himself in the experiences and locations of the works. For instance, he lived among the Bedouins, and he tried the flesh in West Africa. Whether these stories were used for sensationalism or true cross-cultural understanding, Seabrook's narratives brought readers into new worlds. Seabrook's gonzo journalism predated Hunter S. Thompson's development of the genre in the 1970s. For more biographical information, I highly recommend reading Joe Ullman's graphic novel, The Abominable Mr. Seabrook. As I mentioned in the previous slide, Seabrook tries to speak some type of truth, even though he never really untangles facts and situations to reveal the real truth. George A. Romero, in the 2016 edition of The Magic Island, explains Seabrook's narrative style. Quote, "Throughout The Magic Island, the author presents to the reader a teeter-totter, the ends of its board alternatingly rising and falling, with belief on one end, skepticism on the other, while he sits atop the fulcrum, never fully deciding which end he favors." End quote. Romero's analogy of the teeter-totter is an accurate one in my opinion. Like any literary innovator, Seabrook measures the reader's expectations and reactions to guide the story. This ability, though, has some cost, which includes stretching the truth and or exerting himself as a character. These latter devices are fine and appropriate for fiction, but they become problematic in a non-fictional, quote-unquote, true account/story. Let's explore this problem a little before moving on. Seabrook offers an insight into his storytelling technique. Quote, "I quite realize that in writing about this social-racial tangle, which I seem to be doing on every other page, just as one encounters it on every other step in Port-au-Prince, I'm piling up paradoxes, illogicalities, and non sequiturs. but I refuse to be blamed for the illogicality. The thing itself is essentially tangled, illogical, and insane. It'd be the easiest thing in the world to choose to select the facts on one side alone and present a consistent picture, but it wouldn't be a true picture, end quote. Seabrook seems to admit that the book is loaded with paradoxes and illogicalities. I would encourage readers to pick a few of these to critique the book and its premises. One such place to offer criticism is when Seabrook observes the Patro ceremony, found in Chapter 3 of Part 1. This chapter begins with Seabrook's invitation to observe the Patro sacrifice. At first, Lewis brings him into the community, vouching for his mission to observe and learn. And this cachet allows him to be accepted by Maman Sili, the voodoo priestess, who Seabrook claims lets him live with her. As a critic, we need to be suspicious of this interaction and relationship. Indeed, Seabrook claims a special status with this woman when he writes, quote, "Between Maman Sili and me, there was a bond which I cannot analyze or hope to make others understand because of my innermost self. Its root went deep beyond analysis and conscious reasoning. We had both felt it almost from our first contact, as if we had known each other always, had been at some past time united by the mystical equivalent of an umbilical cord, as if I had sucked in infancy at her dark breast, had wandered far, and was now returning home," end quote. There are a lot of ideas to unpack here. For one, he has never met this woman before. It is presumptuous of him to assume this preternatural connection. Even though it is irrational and, quote, beyond analysis, end quote, this connection on his part belies a few extra unspoken elements, his race and his nationality. As a white American man, during the occupation, Seabrook is basically untouchable in Haiti, and he can go wherever he chooses to go, whether he is welcomed or not. Maman Sili and her agency in this scene are usurped by Seabrook, and as he says, he does not want to analyze why he feels drawn to this woman. For a second point, Seabrook describes the bond like fraternal twins, sharing a womb with each other and suspended and tied together in a mystical umbilical cord. While this language tricks us into seeing them bonded in this way, we cannot forget that they are not related in any way. Seabrook himself also sullies this twin metaphor when he converts her from twin sister, sharing the womb, to the mother, quote, "as if I sucked in infancy at her dark breast," end quote. Here, Maman Sili becomes, in his eyes, his black mother, evoking Oedipal, Freudian, and other psychological dimensions in this relationship suddenly. We also need not forget the enslaved connotations either of wet nurses who fed both black and white children. Despite his claim, Seabrook has not returned home in any way. Her personality, friendliness, and warmth, perchance, does not make her his sister or his symbolic or ancestral mother. However, Seabrook uses this relationship, imbalanced as may be, to gain access into this Patro ceremony/sacrifice. As a side note, Maman Sili does not really reappear after this first section. So much for a family reunion. In this ceremony and others in Haitian Vodou, animals are sacrificed symbolically or as surrogates for people. In the long quote above, part of this ceremony is described by Seabrook. He mentions that this moment stays with him, quote, "like a dream," end quote. By equating this moment to a dream, Seabrook calls attention to the unreal nature of this moment, yet he wants us to see it as real and factual. This contradiction is a paradox. Moreover, he says he will remember the sounds of the goat and the, quote, howling of the women. These auditory displays make him feel, quote, something that was elemental male in himself, end quote. Something that evoked terror into him. Seabrook employs Gothic elements and techniques in the first part of the book that indicate his disconnection to Haiti and its religion. These elements of the Gothic make him aware of his senses yet above the fray of the Haitian voodoo ceremonies. In this way, he almost becomes a voyeur. Indeed, he knows that everyone in the ceremony become blood frenzied. He tells us that he is terrified, but he is not afraid because they are his, quote, friends, end quote. Friends in the way Mamansili is to him as well. As the quote concludes, Seabrook is quick to remind us that this terror is based in blackness. Quote, it was a terror of something blacker and more implacable than they, a terror of the dark, all-engulfing womb, end quote. Again, Seabrook evokes the womb imagery to signify a primordial, primitive ceremony. Seabrook continues to observe and describe this ceremony. As the ceremony reaches its zenith, Seabrook becomes a full voyeur. He explains, quote, and now the literary, traditional white stranger who spied from hiding in the forest had such a one lurked by would have seen all the wildest tales of voodoo fiction justified. In the red light of torches which made the moon turn pale, leaping, screaming, writhing, black bodies, blood-maddened, sex-maddened, God-maddened, drunken, whirled and danced their dark saturina, heads thrown weirdly back as if their necks were broken, white teeth and eyeballs gleaming, while couples seized one another from time to time, fled from the circle as if pursued by furies into the forest to share and slake their ecstasy, end quote. What is significant in this scene is not the scene itself, but Seabrook's presence at it. He does not belong here, yet he cannot remove himself from it. Instead, he just watches perversely and judgmentally. Seabrook ends this passage by summarizing it in his reaction. Quote, it was savage and abandoned, and it seemed to me magnificent and not devoid of a certain beauty. Something inside myself awoke and responded to it, end quote. What that something is that awakens, we do not know. It is the critic's job to explain that something. I wanted to show in this slide that Seabrook cannot be completely trusted. His position as a white American man during the occupation gives him a certain amount of privilege. As the book continues, Seabrook stops to comment on this role. He says, quote, I notice I have been continually writing they, using the time-honored pronoun employed by so many otherwise vicarious and candid travel authors when describing wild happenings, which they feel may be regarded dubiously by sisters and aunts back home. Very well, the truth. I drank like the rest when the bottles were passed my way, end quote. He admits that he employs the travel writer convention of separating subject versus object, yet he participates in the experience and puts himself in the center of the action, or at least at the center of the narrative. After all, he knows this important comment at the book's beginning, quote, writers of fiction generally must stick to probabilities, or at least possibilities, more or less. But in real life, there are no such limitations, end quote. In other words, he is not limited to any such probabilities or possibilities. He can play with truth and realities. According to Seabrook, he can get away with this playfulness because he was studying, quote, primitive peasant life, end quote. The book's structure is important because it jumps around to various topics and situations in Haiti. One strategy to analyze the book would be to concentrate on each section independently, because each presents a specific view of Haiti and its society. Each section operates under different styles or genres. The first part of the book, entitled Voodoo Rites, is perhaps the most famous and or notorious. This section addresses Seabrook's investigation of Haitian Vodou and its rites and rituals. I would encourage anyone to compare and contrast his accounts with other sources to verify and or dispel his stories. This section resembles a Gothic novel and its tools to speak to the terror and vastness of Haiti upon Seabrook's personality. For a deeper understanding of Gothic ideas, please consult Edmund Burke's A Philosophical Inquiry into the Origin of Our Ideas of the Sublime and Beautiful, which is considered a foundational text for Gothicism, written in 1756. Many of the book's techniques apply directly to Burke's concepts and definitions. The second part, entitled Black Sorcery, addresses zombies and the death cult in Haiti. We will return to this situation soon. Chapter 3 of this section was the basis for the film White Zombie. This section resembles horror and pulp novels of the early 20th century. The third part, entitled The Tragic Comedy, extensively chronicles the interaction between Haitians and Americans during the occupation. It also explains the legacy of American culture and racism on Haitian society. We will return to this section soon as well. This section contains elements of a political novel. The fourth part, entitled Trail Winds, chronicles several adventures to locations around the country. This section is not organized chronologically, which presents an interesting but rewarding challenge to interpret the book. There are a lot of stories and characters in this section that could be analyzed to show the United States occupation and the psychology behind it. This section operates similar to a picaresque narrative and adventure novels. Each part adds up to an interesting, although paradoxical, examination of Haiti from an outsider's perspective. This part of the presentation will address the American occupation of Haiti. I want to convey this historical period and how it affected Haiti at the time and how it still impacts Haiti now. We'll also look at how the book discusses this occupation/intervention. The first quote explains what an occupation means. Scholar Raphael Dalio provides a deeper overview of this occupation, writing, quote, "From 1915 to 1935, then, the United States engaged in a grand nation-building experiment in Haiti. Without having to worry about respecting local political, social, or economic relations, U.S. representatives in Haiti were able to socially engineer their vision of a utopia. The main areas of this transformation were the political system and the economy, especially finance and agriculture. Upon arrival, the Marines dissolved Haiti's existing political institutions. In the place of the Haitian army, a new gendarmerie was created that would operate as Haiti's state during the occupation. A new Haitian president was chosen by the occupying forces, and despite initial confusion over who was in charge, U.S. officials and Haitian government officials, whose salaries were withheld whenever they failed to comply with U.S. instructions, quickly learned to defer to the Marines. The gendarmerie was able to wield virtually unlimited, unchecked power on the island. Thousands of Haitians were killed to establish and maintain this power. As the occupation dragged on, Marines trained Haitians to serve in the gendarmerie with the goal of having local forces take over this National Guard after the occupation. During the shorter occupation of the Dominican Republic, the United States built a similar militarized police force and left behind just as powerful an institution with Raphael Trujillo at its head. In Haiti, the United States created gendarmerie would eventually set the stage for Francois Duvalier's Touten-Macoute. End quote. We have to remember that the United States began its colonial enterprise in the Caribbean during the Spanish-American War by taking over Puerto Rico in 1898. We also purchased the U.S. Virgin Islands in 1917 from Denmark. We also set up various commercial viable but false governments in Central America/Caribbean nations of Guatemala and Honduras, known as banana republics. The United States had an advantageous relationship with Cuba prior to 1959. Haiti and the Dominican Republic were another sphere of influence for the United States. For more information about other colonial experiences in the Caribbean by the United States, please watch my videos on Tiffany Unique's Land of Love and Drowning about the U.S. Virgin Islands and V.S. Nepal's Miguel Street about the World War II intervention on Trinidad. These videos can be found on my YouTube channel. For an understanding of Raphael Trujillo's Dominican Republic, please read The Brief Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde by Junette Diaz. America's racism at the time and its ideas about exceptionalism, i.e., the concept that the United States is an exceptionally divined country of greatness, informs its control over territories. Historian Hans Schmidt, who wrote the definitive book on the occupation, explains this mentality. Quote, "Racist preconceptions, reinforced by the current debasement of Haiti's political institutions, placed the Haitians far below levels Americans considered necessary for democracy, self-government, and constitutionalism. The generous and even noble narcissistic compulsion to bestow American civilization was stymied by self-defeating ethnocentric prejudices, cultivated during several centuries of domination over Indians and black slaves, which stigmatized the subject peoples as genetically and culturally inferior. Moreover, the occupation in Haiti always gave first priority to United States political, military, and economic interests. The belief that Haitians were inherently inferior, coupled with the dictates of State Department diplomacy in the Caribbean, led to a grotesque perversion of the declared missionary ideal of spreading liberal democracy. Indeed, the occupation, in the process of exercising unwelcome foreign military domination, consistently suppressed local democratic institutions and denied elementary political liberties. End quote. As you read The Magic Island, you can see several examples of this grotesque perversion. Another way to think about this mentality corresponds to paternalism, a term that often explains unhealthy power relationships between the colonizer and the colonized. Renda describes this reality in Haiti. Quote, paternalism, we might say, was the cultural flagship of the United States in Haiti, end quote. This paternalism worked well to support the United States' larger objectives for the occupation. Quote, the occupation, that temporary arm of the state, sought to engage Americans as passive participants in and supporters of the U.S. empire. Through paternalistic representations of its work in Haiti, the United States encouraged not only Marines, but others as well to see themselves as benefactors, helping out a needy, if recalcitrant child, end quote. While it is based on power structures, paternalism also is reinforced by racism and cultural biases. Before we examine Seabrook's take on the occupation, let's look a little closer at this process. Shortly after the Marines arrived, a new American-sponsored Constitution of 1918 was passed. Schmidt explains, quote, its most important provisions were the legalization of alien land ownership, indefinite suspension of the elected bicameral Haitian legislature, temporary suspension of the irremovability of judges, and legalization of all acts of the American military occupation. The new Constitution, clearly a device to serve American ends, was rammed through by means of an illegal Marine-supervised plebiscite after the Haitian legislature, the only body legally competent to tamper with the Constitution under existing Haitian law, was summarily disbanded because it refused to consider any alteration of the long-standing precept which outlawed alien land ownership as a bulwark against recurrence of white foreign domination. The elected legislature was henceforth replaced by a Council of State appointed by the occupation's client president. It did not sit again until after the anti-American strikes and riots of 1929. Respect for law and legal contracts applied only in cases which suited American purposes, end quote. In other words, quote, American commitment to efficiency, technical expertise, and rational organization can be seen in the methods and models drawn upon in setting up the occupation. The most important decision in this respect was the granting of overall authority to an American military officer instead of a civilian official. The Marine general who served as American High Commissioner also had absolute authority over both the military and civilian facets of the occupation. The effect of the system was to rationalize the chain of command by eliminating civilian-military feuding, to strengthen military control of the country, and to emphasize command authority as opposed to consensual or participatory relationship with the Haitians, end quote. Schmidt's explanation here provides good context for this occupation. This trial colonization, so to speak, emerged out of the progressive movement in American politics. Schmidt again explains, quote, in the United States, the progressive movement was also associated with nationalism, the personal charisma of Teddy Roosevelt and Woodrow Wilson, and with ethnic and racial elitism exemplified by discrimination against blacks, immigration laws, and proposals human genetical selectivity. In Haiti, these elements were lacking. Instead of nationalism, the occupation entailed foreign military domination under an autocratic Marine general. Instead of appealing to ethnic and racial elitism, the Americans approached Haitians with ethnic and racial contempt. Instead of charismatic leadership, the occupation had client President Borno, a man who publicly disparaged his countrymen and who was despised as a collaborator. In effect, the occupation embodied all the progressive attitudes of contemporary Italian fascism and was crippled by failures in human relationships. For all the technical expertise, scientific agriculture, and modern rational organization, the occupation's uplift programs achieved only marginal results, end quote. Despite its forward-thinking roots, the progressive policies did not work in Haiti. The middle quote offers a strong summation of this situation. Schmidt sees Haiti as the first confirmation of Americans' foreign policy in the century to come. Seabrook offers many insights on the American presence in Haiti, including the foundation of its government. Seabrook rather accurately explains the political process before intervention, which Schmidt confirms. Quote, a candidate for the office of president would form a CACO, part-time military adventurers organized around strongmen. This CACO army in the north of Haiti would capture the port of Cape Haitian, declare himself a legitimate rival of the incumbent president, and march on Port-au-Prince. Since the CACO army approached Port-au-Prince, plundering as it moved along, the incumbent president would often leave the country with part of the treasury funds. The CACO army would then capture Port-au-Prince, surround the legislature, and oversee the election of the insurgent candidate by the Haitian Senate. From 1888 to 1915, no Haitian president served a complete 7-year term, and only one died a natural death while in office. The other 10 were either killed or overthrown, 7 of them during the chaotic period after 1911. The main prize for successful revolutionaries was to control the custom houses, which accounted for all the government revenues, end quote. For this reason and others outlined earlier, the United States felt compelled to intervene in Haiti. Most of the Magic Island discusses Haiti during the occupation period. The occupation ends sooner than planned. Schmidt details this withdrawal. Quote, the 1929 uprisings resulted in the abandonment of repressive, authoritarian policies and complementary uplift programs in favor of rapid transferal of political control back to the Haitians. The United States' objective was to get out of Haiti as quickly as possible, even though this meant an overwhelming victory of anti-American forces in popular elections and a seemingly inevitable reversal of the pre-1915 political and social conditions. All allusions to uplift and progress were forsaken as officials of the occupation frankly predicted that disaster would follow in the aftermath of the American withdrawal. The major barrier to early American withdrawal was not concerned over having adequate time to transfer treaty services and uplift programs to competent Haitians, but rather the problem of satisfying commitments to American bondholders who insisted on continued American financial control. After a crash program of Haitianization, the government departments and laborious negotiations for transfer of the Banque Nationale and continuation of the American financial control, the last Marines were finally withdrawn in mid-1934, 2 years in advance of the 1936 date stipulated in the treaty, end quote. This sudden exit helped to create a climate for future upheavals and failures. Quote, despite the tumultuous fanfare of Haiti's official liberation, its dependency on the United States became even more entrenched during this post-occupation period, end quote. Indeed, quote, by the mid-1960s, Haiti had the lowest life expectancy, the lowest per capita calorie intake, the lowest per capita gross national product, the lowest literacy rate, 10%, and the lowest percentage of children in school in any Latin American country. The morbid specter of expanding population and inadequate food supply envisioned by the occupation officials was becoming a reality, end quote. The final quote on this slide gives a final appraisal of this occupation/colonization. Sadly, the epitaph for this occupation is that it has been forgotten or erased in Americans' memories. Valio affirms this fact. Quote, although U.S. Marines were thus in Haiti for nearly 2 decades, no one, aside from Haitians, who from the standpoint of global political discourse don't count, remembers the occupation of Haiti, end quote. Claude McKay's character of Ray in his novels Home to Harlem and Banjo may be the longest lasting memory keeper of this occupation. It is important to remember that Seabrook's discussion of the American occupation chronicles the middle period after the Marines-backed gendarmerie had been in power. He clues us in early in the book by using the phrase Americanized Haiti. Later, Seabrook labels Haiti as, quote, our own benevolent American protectorate, end quote. Significantly, Seabrook vacillates between denouncing the occupation, denigrating the Haitian people, and outright offering bigoted remarks. Again, think about the paradoxes he uses in his narrative technique. For instance, he writes, quote, the Haitian peasants are thus double-natured in reality, sometimes moved by savage, atavistic forces whose dark depths no white psychology could ever plumb, but often, even in their weirdest customs, naive, simple, harmless children, end quote. Later, he praises the significant structure of changes in Haiti by the Americans, quote, excellent roads, sewers, hospitals, sanitation, stabilized currency, economic prosperity, and political peace, end quote. And then in the same breath, Seabrook proclaims the occupation's dark side too. Quote, the most interesting and pervasive of the American innovations is the belated nature and race consciousness which we have been at pains to teach the Haitian upper class, end quote. The top quote stands in for the flippant attitude American officials had for the country and its people. Seabrook also cast his judgment and prejudices, noting at one point, quote, these urban Haitians, free, vain, independent, masters in their own land for a long 100 years or more, had accumulated money, education, and literature, and artistic tradition, and had somehow forgotten that God, in his infinite wisdom, had intended that Negroes to remain always an inferior race, end quote. He continues this train of thought when he says, quote, and one of the most difficult problems of the American occupation has been to teach these people their proper place. It has been difficult because the Haitians have refused to accept this lesson graciously, end quote. He is perplexed when he says, quote, there are Haitians who draw a reverse color line and dare to despise white people, end quote. Wonder why? As the previous slide indicated, America exported its racism and policies into Haiti. Seabrook notes that public spaces became segregated in the Black Republic. For, quote, you cannot reciprocate by inviting any Haitian to our club, not even the president of the republic, end quote. This racism above all else seems to be more damaging. The second quote speaks to the shame Haitians begin to develop about themselves. Later, a gray-bearded Haitian stops Seabrook and tells his perspective. Now our children are ashamed to be Negro, ashamed to be Haitian. Some of us older ones too. It seems to me that we are being poisoned. I'm told the Americans have brought to our country prosperity, peace, security, material improvement. Be it so. Can those things compensate for the destruction of our pride, the poisoning of our soul? End quote. Seabrook gives a paradoxical, lukewarm evaluation of this occupation in the end. Quote, the presence of the Americans has put an end to many things. It has put an end to revolution, mob violence, and many other deplorable conditions which the entire reasonable world agrees should be put an end to. It has also put an end, or, if not an end, a period, to more than a century of national freedom of a particular sort, which has existed nowhere else on earth save Liberia. The freedom of a Negro people to govern or misgovern themselves, to stand forth as human beings like any other without cringing or asking leave of any white man. I do not understand these things, end quote. Seabrook notes that the material success of the intervention, yet he does not understand why it is peculiar or cannot imagine Black people governing themselves. In the end, Seabrook finds that the project was bad. Quote, I was assured all over again that the whole American occupation was for sinister and selfish ends, that all present improvements were but part of a big program of subsequent industrial exploitation, that President Bourneau was merely a puppet in the hands of a greedy Wall Street. End quote. This last quote signifies a less tangled truth in the book. Before we conclude our discussion of the Magic Island, I want to offer some context for Haitian Vodou. As you can see, the correct term for this religion is spelled on the screen. The phonetic spelling of voodoo, Voodoo, can be seen as derogatory. According to the Encyclopedia Britannica, voodoo is a worldview encompassing philosophy, medicine, justice, and religion. Its fundamental principle is that everything is a spirit. Humans are spirits who inhabit the visible world. The unseen world is populated by spirits, mysteries, the invisibles, angels, and the spirits of ancestors and the recently deceased. All these spirits are believed to live in a mythic land called Guinan, a cosmic Africa. The God of the Christian Bible is understood to be the creator of both the universe and the spirits. The spirits were made by the God to help govern humanity in the natural world, end quote. In addition, quote, the primary goal and activity of voodoo is to serve the spirits, to offer prayers and perform various devotional rites directed at God and the particular spirits in return for health, protection, and favor. Spirit possession plays an important role in Afro-Haitian religion, as it does in other many world religions. During religious rites, believers sometimes enter a trance-like state in which the devotee may eat and drink, perform stylized dances, give spiritually inspired advice to people, or perform medical cures or special physical feats. These acts exhibit the incarnate presence of the spirit within the entranced devotees. According voodoo ritual activity, e.g. prayer, song, dance, and gesture, is aimed at refining and restoring balance and energy in relationships between people and the spirits of the unseen world, end quote. While he gets some of this information correct in the book, Seabrook also seems to be sensationalizing it. According to another scholar on this religion, quote, Haitian Vodou is a system of beliefs and rituals that mine the experiences of everyday people for reflection, healing, and inspiration. The religion, intertwined with and responsive to lived experience, is valuable to the needs of its believers. It informs perceptions of individual and collective history and answers to the tribulations of worshipers, providing the potential for valuable healing for people who have endured historical and ongoing oppression. Interwoven with everyday life, voodoo supplies basic knowledge on how to operate in the world. The sacred and the secular are not mutually exclusive, but are entangled, and the divine can be called in for aid and support in moments of celebration or crisis, or to address common concerns that confront practitioners in their daily lives, end quote. Like other Black liberation theologies, quote, voodoo traditions pay homage to various West and Central African religious communities. Enslaved Africans in Haiti had to engage in dialogues with people from many religions and ethnic groups, creating an eclectic African diasporic religious system. In voodoo, the spirits are categorized according to their ancestry and their beliefs they personify, end quote. Specific to Haitian voodoo, quote, the gods care about how they look. African diasporic gods are not symbols. They are thinking, feeling, drinking, and talking entities in the lives and ritual practices of devotees, end quote. Seabrook tries to depict these characteristics, but he does not really understand them. He explains that, quote, in America, the word voodoo has come to mean indiscriminately any Negro sorcery, secret ceremony, or old African witch doctor practice, end quote. He does not really tease out the differences in religious practices in Haiti and the diaspora. Seabrook does note that voodoo is an alive religion. Later in a note, he explains how voodoo evolved by a hybridity of African religions and customs and Catholicism and iconography. I like to think of this religion in Hurston's phrase above. Voodoo is about creation and life. And for Haitian voodoo, voodoo is that ancestral home, the foundational source of the religion's heritage. The Magic Island once again offers a complicated appreciation and history of this religion. To get a broad overview, please consult Margaret Mitchell Armand's Healing in the Homeland, Haitian Voodoo Tradition. For more information, I recommend reading Voodoo and the Haitian Experience, a Black Atlantic Perspective in Voodoo and Haitian Memory, the idea and representation of voodoo in Haitian imagination. The Magic Island also introduces the concept of zombies. As the quote on the left indicates, Seabrook's zombies are living, dead individuals. The zombies described in the book resemble Romero's Night of the Living Dead zombies more than the ones found in The Walking Dead. The zombies in the book are more reanimated bodies than ones affected with some mysterious disease. Like everything in the book, we have to untangle Seabrook's truth. He mentions one of the American conglomerates, Hasco, and its practices of employment. According to the book, the Hasco Company employs zombies to harvest sugar. Seabrook describes these men and women. Quote, one morning an old black headman, T. Joseph of Coulibaly, appeared leading a band of ragged creatures who shuffled along behind him, staring dumbly like people walking in a daze. As Joseph lined them up for registration, they still stared vacant-eyed like cattle and made no reply when he asked to give their names. End quote. This characterization of zombies overlooks the working conditions of these men and women. What could be going on is the phenomenon called zombification, where an individual's spirit has been damaged or removed by malevolent forces and actors. Perhaps Hasco and the Overseer stole the workers' souls. In the comics panel on the right, Joe Ullman, from his graphic narrative biography of Seabrook, imagines this encounter differently. The workers are not really the walking dead, yet they are without feelings and emotions. Ullman notes that they are blank-eyed and demand that Seabrook leave them alone. I unravel that Ullman's scene is more accurate to the truth. For more about zombification, please see my YouTube video on Erna Broadberg's novel, Mila. I cannot leave a discussion of the Magic Island without mentioning the controversial original art in the book. Alexander King illustrated the pictures in the slide above. King poorly imitates Gauguin or Picasso and the Primitivism movement. The image on the left depicts one of Seabrook's descriptions of the ceremony with Maman Sili. The image on the right depicts a papillon. In my opinion, these illustrations are more exploitative and stereotypical than real. They appear more voyeuristic than authentic. A critic could also build an analysis of the book based solely on the illustrations. To counter the poor depictions from King, I wanted to show two artists from the Harlem Renaissance. On the left is one of Aaron Douglas's illustrations for James Weldon Johnson's book, God's Trombones. On the right is Hal Woodruff's woodcut of a lynching. Please notice how the black men are depicted in these images, with dignity and pride and strength, not exaggerations of these qualities as caricatures and stereotypes as in King. I hope this video teaches you how to interpret and understand a work written from an outside perspective about the Caribbean. In the slide above, I have listed some key takeaways. Here are some sources to learn more about the book and Haiti. Here are the rest of the sources.